Of course. Ah, hi, everybody. I'm back again. And yeah, apparently being ambushed by cats. Um, that, as is the way, there may be a fight in the background again. If there is, I may have to break it up. We'll see. Hopefully, things go quietly. Um, barring that, hopefully, the only adventure that happens tonight is the adventure in the story. So, yes, it is early again. Like I said, I apologize for the sporadic schedule. I am going to be all over the place, which is maybe not the best thing for a live broadcast. But then again, there is the replay, so that I'm making available. So there's that. Shh. Yeah. So for those of you who are just tuning in, this is I'm currently reading my dad's manuscript. I am also making live editing changes. So I may have my head down a lot. And if I go really silent, it means I'm trying to uh, mark up a bunch of editing so I can do the edits the same evening. I'm doing this because I have a lot of manuscripts to go through. Um, yeah, and there's a lot of manuscripts to go through. I need to go through them. One of the best ways to edit is to hear the story out loud. Now, that's not always true because in some ways, some things orate better than they orate, aka verbally, come out better than they do on paper. And sometimes you have to see them on paper in order to fully appreciate the story. But major glaring errors will show up. So unless they're, like I said, very specific reason behind it. Um, that was my initial thought behind doing this. I'm currently on chapter 13 of 32. So I'm almost halfway. So if you were to come in without having heard anything else before this, I do recommend that you go back to the previous podcasts to to listen to those story that part of the story so you can get an idea of where we're at in the story. What I will say is that was that when last we left our hero, I'll go into that. Yeah, because without further ado, and the name of this, wow. See, this is what happens with live broadcasting, no script. This is me. um, the name of the story is the Saga of Haram, and what's also interesting about it is not only is it a fantasy story, pretty sure it's based off of at least one D&D campaign that my dad ran. Just part of it, that parts of it kind of click together and kind of sound similar and familiar. So, yeah, the names were changed to protect the innocent, aka possibly, I think, my ranger, possibly. I don't know. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to launch into the story now. When last we left our hero, a vision of red streaked his eyes as he went for an onslaught of goblins. There we go. Chapter 13: The Saga of Haram. He was standing against a tree with a reddened sword in hand, and around him were the corpses of a number of goblins. He looked up. The other members of Vorath's band were standing about, looking at him with strange expressions. A small fire had been lit, painting everything with a flickering red tinge. Why have they lit a fire already? He wondered. And why has it become twilight so soon? He looked up to them and tried to speak, but found his mouth and throat so dry that he could only make a hoarse croaking noise. Afal Kayon hastened over with a water skin in his hand. As Haram took it, he noticed his hands were shaking, and that his arms were cut and nicked, and that he was generally covered with blood. He took a swallow of water. How went it? How went it? Barath asked, astonished. You do not know? He shook his head. I remember nothing of the fight. What happened? Pavel Kayon turned to Vorath. I warned you it would be thus, Vorath, he said, in his Rahasan accent tinging his speech. After the battle madness, they seldom remember what deeds were done. So what happened then? Haram pressed his inquiry. By the looks of things, you arrived in time. Vorath smiled thinly. We arrived in time, but only barely. By the time we arrived, you had dealt with nigh half of them. We believe we have killed most of the goblins now. Ah, there seemed little or nothing to say. Sit down, Haram. Let Afal Kayan tend your wounds. Haram looked down at himself. I think I have not suffered anything serious, only a few nicks and scratches. I have told you that as well, Varath. Afal Kayan spoke up again. In the battle madness, often they suffer no wounds for all this fighting they do. All that blood probably belongs to goblins, Varath. But all the same, Haram, sit down and let us clean you up a little. Make you fit for company again. A few minutes later, Haram was seated against a tree, half watching the others as they stripped the bodies. He was not paying particular attention since he would not be involved in the sharing out. But he happened to notice that when Tano took a bit of leather cord from around the goblin's neck, looked at the irregularly shaped bit of metal hanging from it on it, and tossed it aside. Tano, he called, don't throw it away. It could be valuable. Tano looked at him in annoyance. Then, as he remembered Haram's part in the battle, his expression turned to wary watchfulness. Watchfulness. That? It's only a torn and ragged bit of copper with strange markings on it. It may be it may be a fragment of one of the copper books of Drumnadrum. Ask Athel Kaon if he can tell. With a skeptical expression still on his face, Tano took a bit of the metal to the magician. He spoke hesitantly. Haram says this may be valuable? What say you? He spoke of someone named Drumnadrum? Athel Kaon took the piece of copper and turned it over. It is difficult to say in this light. He snapped his fingers, and a ball of light appeared behind his head and to the right. He studied the bit of the metal and the writing carefully, then said, Yes, I think it may well be part of the writings of Drumnadrum. I'm not especially familiar with them, but this seems to bear all the marks of his work. It may be it may indeed be valuable to the right person. He turned to look at Haram. What do you know of Drumnadrum? Haram shrugged. Very little. The mage of Ort's band, Sagahan, talked to us about Drumnadrum and his writings when we found a similar scrap of metal. Other than that, I know nothing. The next day found the party back at the village, once again having dinner at the inn. Once again, Mayor Trosso came in and approached them diffidently. As to the matter of your payment, sir, he said to Vorath, there is a little difficulty. Vorath looked up at him. What sort of difficulty? 26 goblins at 5 silver ponies per head equals 130, plus a bonus of 80 for over 20, for a total of 210 ponies. Sir, there are not 210 silver ponies in the whole town. Vorath frowned. Then you made a bargain which you had no intention of keeping? The mayor waved his hands hastily. Not at all, sir, not at all. But we never expected you to kill over 20, and certainly not 26. As I said, there is not so much silver in the whole town. What would you suggest then? We have gathered 130 ponies worth, though some of it is in copper. In 2 months' time, we could gather the rest, though it will leave the village nigh destitute for years to come, putting us into the hands of moneylenders. On the other hand, if you come back in a year's time, we'll give you the rest along with a payment of an extra 10 ponies as a penalty for late payment. Would you accept that? Hiram watched as Vorath considered this. The plunder taken from the goblins was mediocre, though the scrap of copper may be valuable if they could find the right if they could find the right person to whom to offer it. Aside from that, they'd taken about 20 ponies worth of money, much of it in copper, and a jeweled pin from the goblin chief, which Vorath had said was worth about a gold crown. Vorath nodded. Done then, Mayor Crosso. Bring us the present payment, and we shall stay the night. In a year's time or so, we shall return. Let us say that if we do not return within 3 years, then we will not be returning. Agreed? Agreed. The mayor looked much relieved. I thank you, sir. There are many who have taken what money we have and looted the town as well to make up the lack. Borath smiled. And the word would get around, and such people would find scant welcome in any town throughout Eridar. All I ask is that you take this as a warning, and do not make bargains which we may not be able to fulfill. The money, as Mayor Crosso had warned, was not all in silver. Vorath paid Haram his fee first of all. Then Haram went to another table, while Vorath shared out the proceeds with the others. When that was done, he joined Haram. Where will he go now, lad? He opened his mouth to speak, then found he had nothing to say. Just as he had not thought on getting his sword from Vraka, he had not thought beyond dealing with this band of goblins. For a moment, there was a picture in his mind of a triangular face framed by yellow curls, but he set his mind against that. Tariel would not want to see him. All he could do was remind her of a terrible experience. After a moment, he said, I suppose I'll go to the nearest city. Perhaps I will find a band there to join with. Ah, would you wish to accompany us to the city of Yathdar Lantum? Haram looked at the other members of the band, who were busily spending some of their new wealth on ale. I think your men would not wish me to accompany them. Borath waved a hand. For a time they were not sure that being a slave of the goblins had destroyed you as a fighter. Now they are a little wary of you. Battle madness is a strange thing, and there have been some who use the threat of battle madness to get their own way, to bully their companions. If you were to try that, I think they would not let you stay with us for long. For the time being, at least until we reach the city, we might all benefit from being together. Haram nodded. I will travel to the city with you. In his own mind, though, he had spoken of finding a band to join. He was not at all sure what he wished to do. Perhaps by the time they reached the city, something would occur to him. On the first night out of Sanda, Haram dreamed. Something was pursuing him. Something large and dark. Something which he could not outdistance no matter how hard he ran. He woke, gasping for breath, reaching for his sword. He knew that against what pursued him, the sword was useless. Even as he was reaching for the sword, he saw that the camp was surrounded. There were a dozen or more small man-shaped figures, all glowing red with grotesque features, large noses, sharp teeth, and pointed ears. He saw that he was not the only one awake. A Falcaon was standing up, running a hand through his dark curly hair, and Vorath was standing beside him. The others were also either awake or waking. Are they dangerous? Asked Vorath. A Falcaon frowned, pursed his lips, and shook his head. I always put a protective circle around the camp at night. Not a powerful one, but enough to keep out most things. These cannot break the circle. What do they want? I was just about to ask that, answered the mage. He looked at the small, capering figures, selected one, pointed a finger, and spoke a word in some strange language. The mannequin? And it's not mannequin as in Manquin. No, this is mannequin, Mannikin. Now I need to look that up because I'm not sure what that is. And I'm curious. I'm sure it's a thing, but I don't know what thing it is. The mannequin stopped and looked at him. What do you want here? Demanded a Falcaon. Send out Haram. It was not a request, it was a demand. Yes, yes, yes! Haram, Haram, shouted the others. Both Vorath and Falcaon glanced sharply at Haram, then looked back at the creature. The Falcaon shook his head. No, we cannot do that. Ah, great danger if you do not. Great danger. Send out Haram. Yes, yes, yes. Haram, Haram, Haram. What has he done to you? He has done an ill turn for the master. For this he must be punished. Send him out. Yes, yes, Haram, Haram, Haram. The mage appeared to consider this for a time, then said, No, we cannot send him out. Be gone. The mannequin stamped his foot hard on the grass and snarled. It will go hard with you if you protect the one whom the master wants. And it will go hard for you if you stay too long here to bandy words with me. I will not send him out, and that is my final word. Be gone. The imps danced around the fire, shouting and screaming, and occasionally in their shouts, Hiram could hear his name. The Falcaon spoke again. First, he said in a long sentence in some strange language. Then he said again. Then he said, Again I say to you, be gone. Suddenly, they were gone, as though their light had been extinguished. Vorath looked at the mage. What were those, and what did they want with Haram? They were imps, messengers from Drah, And what they want with Haram, I think only he can tell. All eyes turned to Haram then. I was with Orit's band. We rescued the daughter of a merchant who was taken by the Harnasp of Shabnazdig. Sorry, just give me a second here. All eyes turned to Haram. All eyes turned to Haram then. When I was with Orit's band, he said, we rescued the daughter of a merchant who had been taken by the Harnasp of Shabnazdik. As it turned out, she had been promised as a gift to the god Drah, and he pursued us. We were protected by a druid when the god came upon us at night, and later we had amulets of protection made. Mine was taken by the goblins, so I suppose I am open to attack by the god any time now. The Falcaon frowned. And yet we are far from Shandakar. One would not think he could reach so far. You must have angered him greatly indeed, Haram. What, you must have angered him greatly, Haram. Haram shrugged. When he came to our camp, he seemed very angry. And yet, why should he be so angry over the one girl the less? The maid shrugged in his turn. Who can tell with the gods? It may well be that he had planned a special use for this girl, and you have set back his plans. He may well be unforgiving as such. Tano, who had been listening to all this, spoke up. Is he god hunted? Have we let a god hunted among us? By Trina and Viren, are we fools? Vorath, send him away Vorath, send him away, ere he lead us all to ruin. Vorath glanced at Tano, then turned back to Ephal Kaon. What can be done about this? The easiest would be to do as Tano suggests, and cast him out from among us. On the other hand, we are far from Shandakar, and the power of Drah is weak in these lands. I can make an amulet to protect him, and even a god will not be likely to. And even a god will not likely be willing to extend too much power to merely be avenged upon a mere man. And if we were to go back to Shandakar, would Drah seek revenge on us for sheltering one on whom he seeks revenge? The maid shrugged. Who can say about gods? If and when we travel to Shandakar, I can make amulets for each of us to give us sufficient protection. And I say it is foolishness to have a god hunted among us, shouted Tano. Vorath spoke to Tano sharply. Tano, I offered Haram our company to the city, and I will not break my word now. But he lied to us, or came near to it as makes no matter, hiding this from us. Vorath looked at Haram. I had given it no thought at all. I had the amulet until it was taken by the goblins, and while I was with the goblins, the god troubled me not at all. Now he seeks me again, but I swear to you that I did not purposely conceal this from you. If you wish me to go, I will go. He stood up, preparing to leave them, and was surprised to feel so little concern over the matter. Vorath waved his hand. No, there will be no need of that. I could wish you had mentioned this. I could wish you had mentioned this before, but I will not go back on my word. You may accompany us to the city. Afalkeon, how long will it take for you to make an amulet for him? A few hours, no more. I'll begin work on it in the morning. Good, do so. So they went back to their beds, though it was clear that Tana was not completely happy with the matters as they stood. About the middle of the next day, they were coming up to a small stand of willows. A road ran straight through the willows, and Voreth said, "A good place as any for an ambush. A good place for an ambush. Usually in such places, the brush is cut back and a bow shot on either side of the road. The local baron seems to have ignored his obligations." "Have we anything with us to interest bandits?" muttered Tano. Valkaon was seated on his horse, his eyes narrowed. "There's something there," he said. Voreth turned to him. "What is it?" "The lightest and easiest of spells tells me there are people hidden there. If we wait too long, they will know we are aware of them and perhaps change their plan. If we continue as we are, we might be able to surprise them when the time comes. And if they have bows, so do we. And to be obviously stringing our bows here would be to warn the ambushers that we know of them. I have a plan. One or two men would probably be allowed to go by without risk. They want to trap us all. Those who go through would then circle back and take the ambushers in the rear. A risk for those who go through the trap. Who will you send?" Vorath said, I will send no one unwilling. Haram, will you do this for us?" Haram hesitated, then smiled. "I would be the best to send, would I not? No horse, only a sword, not enough to tempt a bandit into loosing an arrow. And yet, if I'm clearly a scout, will they not have someone to watch me as I go?" "Yes, but we will have an argument, you see. Point at the bushes and shout, though not loudly enough to be heard by the people in the ambush." He himself pointed a finger at the bushes and shouted, "The rest of you, gather in a knot here, point at the bushes, talk to each other, move around, each of you string your bow while you're hidden from the sight of the people ahead." "And what would you have me do next?" shouted Haram, pointing up ahead. "Stalk off as if leaving us to our own devices," shouted Vorath. "Done." Haram shrugged and walked away. He'd gone a few paces. He turned. "Do not tarry too long. We will be close behind." He stalked along the path, walking as an angry man, and strode between the bunches of willows. There was a slight bend in the path ahead, and it was entirely possible that someone might shoot from ambush there, hoping to pull Haram's corpse out of sight before the others came close. Haram studied the willows carefully, without seeming to do so. Haram surveyed the willows carefully without seeming to do so. There was no sign of anyone nearby. Coming around the bend of the path, he made a sudden dash for the side of the trail. No arrows followed him. Perhaps there was no one willing to deal with him, or perhaps he had merely moved before the ambusher was ready. He picked up a few pebbles from the ground and took out his sling. With his sling hanging from his hand, stone ready for throwing, he began to creep through the brush. As he went, he tried to remember the lessons in woodcraft and trailcraft which Astoran had given him. That brought back memories of the goblins howling in the morning and the slaughter of Ort's band. He felt like weeping, but no tears would come, and he wondered why. There was a slight motion in front of him, and suddenly he saw a man in a ragged jerkin kneeling behind a bush, short bow in hand, with an arrow on the string. The man was peering down toward the trail, where Vorath's band was now coming along the willows. Haram looked closely around him. He could now see two others off to his left on the side of the trail, and there were probably more across the trail, along with some he could not yet see. Whirling his sling 3 times around his head, he released the stone. It struck the man behind the ear, and he slumped forward into the brush, behind which he was sheltering. The nearest man, hearing the sounds, turned to look. He was still gaping when Haram loosed a second stone at him. He caught him in the chest. He staggered back and down. The third man was now looking at him, and just as Haram was readying another stone in his sling, he heard a sound from behind. He turned to see a ragged man charging at him, brandishing a large battle axe. Rusty and nicked, but deadly for all that. Dropping the sling, Haram drew his sword. For some reason, the war cry he had used in battle with the goblins came to his lips, and he shouted it as the bandit came at him. "May your ancestors be eaten by demons!" And yeah, that's that's this chapter. So yeah, kind of interesting. Yeah. So thank you all for tuning in. Really appreciate it. I always do. And yeah, keep an eye open for tomorrow night, and we'll find out what happens in the next chapter. I do like how it's always kind of, this story is really nice because it's very episodic. And so each chapter just sort of has its own little adventure in it. I like that quite a bit. So I will talk to you all again tomorrow night. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe for where applicable. Like I said, I'm simulcasting. So this is just a thing. But I'll talk to you all again tomorrow. So have a good night.